Welcome to Industry Insights with Route Consultant, your front row seat to the fast-moving world of logistics and beyond. Each week, we bring you game-changing insights, real-world strategies, and fresh perspectives to fuel smarter investments and build stronger businesses. Join us as we sit down with expert guests to explore emerging trends and pressing topics across a wide range of industries. This is Industry Insights. We have Alex Frum here in the studio today, and for anyone who's watching who wants a full breakdown of tariffs, we'll put that on the B-roll. but we have Alex Frum here today to really dive in first into kind of how you found this whole crazy FedEx network. So, Alex, welcome to the studio. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be here. It's kind of funny. I think my background has always made me interested in macro politics and the global. So I got my start. I grew up in Illinois, went off to the United States Military Academy, served 5 years on active duty in the Army overseas.
Well, first off, was the Army, is that a family thing, or was that like I decided from the beginning that the Army was for me?
It's kind of funny. So I've had, historically, family has served in the military during our major conflicts.
Okay.
Like my grandfather was a captain in the U.S. Army during World War II. Mm-hmm. Didn't have anybody, like my previous generations didn't have anybody that fought in World War I, but I have relatives that fought in the Civil War.
Yep.
Like my family came to the United States around the Civil War timeframe.
Okay.
And we came from what is historically mostly Eastern Europe. But that's a little bit too much history. But it was kind of funny. I always wanted. I actually, grew up. I was 10 years old when Top Gun came out.
Okay, yeah.
So I wanted to be a F-14 Tomcat pilot for a very long time, and I first initially wanted to go to the Naval Academy, and then I had crap eyesight. I had the worst eyesight you can imagine.
Yeah.
I had one eye that was not too bad. It was like 20/30 or 20/40, and then my other eye was like 20/80 or something like that. So
enough of a problem.
Enough of a problem that I wasn't going to be a pilot, and the idea of me serving on a ship or being in a submarine for 5 years was not appetizing. So I was recruited to both the Naval Academy and West Point to play water polo and swim.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Did you play water polo?
Yeah. So
water polo is one of those that just fascinates me because it looks impossible that you can swim and play that sport without standing.
Yeah. I mean, it's I loved the sport.
Yeah.
It's kind of like playing football in the water.
Yeah, but you have to swim and elevate yourself above the water the whole time. It's insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, you learn how to tread water. I have the perfect frame for it. I'm 6'5".
Yeah.
Coming out of high school, I was 190. It was actually kind of funny. I actually got cut from my football team because I was too small, and then I grew exponentially. And, by then it was too late.
It was too late, yeah.
I was just focused on water polo and swimming. So I got recruited by both. I went to go visit both, and I remember having the conversation with my parents, when I came down to make the decision between the Naval Academy, which is in Annapolis, Maryland, right on the water, and West Point, or the United States Military Academy, which is in West Point, New York, about 45 minutes north of New York City.
Yeah.
And to me, the rooms were much bigger at West Point. So I'm not very claustrophobic, but put 4 people in in a small room, I do get a little bit overwhelmed with.
So that's why you didn't want to serve on a ship. Yeah.
So I went Army. I had an amazing experience for my 4 years at West Point. It was hard, and there were plenty of times when I cried home to my mama asking her to,
you got beat down by everyone around you all day.
Everybody.
Yeah.
But went to West Point, had a lot of fun. Branched armor, went to Germany. So I was in M1 tanks. Went to Germany, spent 4 years in Germany, did a couple deployments, had a blast. Decided to get out of the Army, and didn't know what to do with my life. I had a couple job offers, but decided to go to grad school, which was a good thing because I met my wife at grad school. So God has a reason for everything. So I met my wife at grad school. Went to New York and worked on Wall Street. So I spent 15 years on Wall Street as a trader, and then eventually as a sales manager.
So what took you to Wall Street? That's a jump.
Wall Street likes a lot of people from the military.
Okay.
A lot of industries, I think, like people from the military. if you're looking for salespeople, the military is great. Just like athletes, a lot of the military, they're self-starters, they're highly motivated. But the other thing is that they can tell stories, right? So I have a whole bag full of stories that I can tell somebody and just entertain for hours on end.
Yeah.
Just like athletes have a whole bag of stories that they can do. So when you're looking for salespeople, so a lot of Wall Street wants people who are organized, disciplined, can process a lot of information. That's the other thing I think the military does really well is it teaches you how to organize your thoughts and how to process information in a timely manner. Whether you're flying a fighter, flying a helicopter, or you're, a small unit officer leading troops in combat, you're taking in a tremendous amount of information. You have to process that in real time and then make a decision and then go execute the decision.
Yeah.
So Wall Street and then by and large corporate America wants those. So if you're looking for a great career path as an 18-year-old and you don't really know what you want to do, go into the military. They're going to teach you life skills, and then you can go out and you can grow up and do something else. I mean, I think that's the one thing I've reiterated to my kids a lot of times is that there's no rush to grow up. Like I've reinvented myself multiple times, and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I'm 50 years old. Yeah. I think I'm about 25. And, I'm looking for that next,
Yeah. Always the next thing.
Always the next thing. So I went to so from from the Army to Wall Street wasn't that great of a leap. I think for me, what was different was I went into sales and trading, which is the actual trading of not the stock market, but I was trading the bond market. I actually traded, point in talking about tariffs, I traded U.S. government treasuries. I traded European sovereign debt. I traded mortgages. I traded the debt of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So I was there during the financial crisis. I started off at Bear Stearns, so the first bank to implode. I was there when that happens. What
was like that? Ground floor look at financial crisis and literally being there as it imploded. What was that like?
It was kind of funny. I think that there were a lot of opportunities for both the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York or the Fed to minimize the financial crisis before it happened, but they didn't realize how bad it was because the bank CEOs didn't want to own up to what they had been doing.
So they were kind of telling a story that made it look worse or less bad than it really was.
Well, so like what brought Bear Stearns down at the end of the day was the big. So there's a financial piping of the market called the repo market. Okay, so that's where a lot of the bank balance sheets are financed on a daily or weekly basis, or even a monthly basis. You can do these overnight transactions called repurchase agreements. Okay. So Bear Stearns literally would fund itself through Fidelity and Putnam and all these other big Vanguard, PIMCO, WAMCO, all these big money center who are running money funds. So you instead of putting your money into a savings account, you put your money into a money fund. The money fund, there's not enough treasury bills outstanding for all the money funds out there, so they put their money in other things as well. And a lot of that is repurchase agreements. So, we'll give you $30 billion, you give us $30 billion worth of assets, and then we take them back the next day and you give us our money back. And you charge a certain rate, whatever, the overnight funding rate is pretty much what it is.
Okay.
March of 2008, a lot of the big institutions were worried about what the collateral that Bear Stearns was giving to these people. I think if the Fed at that point in time had said, we'll guarantee the collateral, you probably offset it and you could have had an organized unwind of the leverage that Bear Stearns, Lehman, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Citigroup all had. Surprisingly, I mean, the two banks that probably had the least amount of exposure to this stuff and had the strongest balance sheets were probably, J.P. Morgan Chase with Jamie Dimon at the helm. Bank of America was pretty well insulated. Goldman Sachs didn't have a tremendous amount of exposure, but a lot of the other big investment banks did. But anyway, so I was there. I remember sitting at my desk and watching the head of the repo desk, kind kind of amazed that Putnam and Fidelity had pulled their the money, and then saying we're done, and walking into the head of Bear Stearns Trading at the time, this gentleman named Warren Spector, and saying we're toast, we're over, it's over.
Yeah.
And then what I will say is the Fed did structure a transaction for us to go over to JP Morgan or JP Morgan to buy all the assets. I'd be really curious to hear from Jamie Dimon right now to say, hey, was that a good transaction or a bad transaction? Because there were positives to it and there were negatives to it. Chase, I think, probably just finally got out of all the lawsuits from the financial crisis.
Yeah,
and a
almost
lot of
20
those
years
are from
ago.
the
Yeah.
legacy of, Bear Stearns or WAMU or all the different banks that they bought. And I think that's something that probably, you would have to ask Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan Chase, was it a positive or negative, all those ancillary lawsuits that they occurred. So I was one of the few traders that went over to JP Morgan.
Okay.
They took all the salespeople, or by and large, a lot of the salespeople, because they had relationships that JP Morgan didn't have, or different relationships. But they didn't want all the traders because they didn't need all those traders.
Yeah.
So I was one of the lucky few. I was a very junior trader at Bear Stearns at the time. I went to JP Morgan. I was expected to be a very junior trader, and my first day on the job, a senior trader that I was going to support left the firm. And so I got put into a position where I was given a tremendous amount of responsibility,
Yeah.
very early on, and I did well. I got promoted that year, got promoted the next year. I stuck around at JP Morgan for about 2.5 years, and then went to another bank called BNP Paribas, which is a French multinational bank. It's kind of the JP Morgan of Europe.
Okay.
It's the largest bank by assets, the most profitable bank in Europe, has a fortress balance sheet. JP Morgan has a fortress balance sheet. JP Morgan, maybe outside of the Trump administration, is usually people call JP Morgan and ask their opinion about, what's going on in the world. Same thing happens with BNP Paribas in Europe. So great, big, huge European bank that was trying to get into the United States. So they wanted me to set up a trading desk that did what I did at JP Morgan. And I did that. It went well. We grew exponentially. Then I got offered a couple different opportunities, moved into sales, became a sales manager, did that for a number of years. And then at the end of the day, I kind of got tired of working on Wall Street. It's when you move into management, and this is something I think I missed. Like I thought I wanted the more responsibility, but and I do, but as being a sales manager or being a trading manager, you're really not doing what's fun, which is trading or selling. You're spending a lot more time on regulatory oversight, which is not as fun. I didn't enjoy reading other people's emails.
Yeah.
And I was doing a lot of that to make sure that we weren't violating FINRA or SEC rules. So in 2018, I kind of said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I'm not having any more fun. My wife told me I was becoming a miserable SOB at home. She said, if you're going to do, we're well off. We've done really well working on Wall Street. Why don't you go start your own thing? So it's 2018. I don't think Spencer had started his podcast yet.
I think we didn't really start that until like 19.
Yeah. So I somehow came across Spencer, maybe from his days in the hedge fund industry, like on a LinkedIn profile or something. We knew the same people. So I reached out to him, and he, I think he spoke to me for like 4 hours trying to tell me about how P&D is the greatest thing in the world. Yeah. And how he got, how he made his transition from hedge funds into, because he was like a commodity, I think he did commodity trading in his hedge fund, or, probably some kind of like merger arb, or actually he was probably an options trader, I bet, doing calendar spreads. But he spent like 4 hours talking to me about how his transition from hedge funds into P&D and how P&D was great. And I came away from that saying, I'm not a P&D kind of guy.
It's great for somebody, but not for me.
Not for me. But he did say, in passing, he talked about Linehaul. Okay. And, said, I don't know if he had bought his first Linehaul route yet, or he was thinking about it. But he's like, you should start off in P&D, and then we can get you into Linehaul. And actually, I don't even know if he had route consultants open at that time yet or not.
It was right around then. Yeah.
So anyways, line haul intrigued me. I'd done a lot of logistics in the Army. When we got deployed, I was in roles where we were doing logistics type kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or my last job in the Army was running a motor pool as a battalion maintenance officer, and I did a lot of logistics type of stuff then as well. Wasn't afraid of tractor trailers. I wasn't afraid of maintenance. Those things didn't really scare me.
Which is different than most people.
Yeah.
Most people, when they see the FedEx space, they're like, oh, I get P&D trucks. Those look like trucks I'm used to, but tractor trailers are completely foreign. So that was a leg up for you, I think.
Yeah, so it didn't scare me. And then the financial side didn't scare me either. Like I knew I could run the numbers, and that's the nice thing. I mean, both businesses are very formulaic, but I would say line haul, especially if you're doing mainline, and we can talk about what mainline versus hub area is later. But if you're doing if you're just going from point A to point B back to point A, or point A to point B to point C back to point A, you're getting paid by the mile, and then you can break everything. I quickly realized you could break everything down as a percentage of what you're getting paid by the mile, and so that at that point it's really easy to see and look at a business and say, oh, you're doing 10,000 miles a week. That's 520,000 miles a year. That's $1,040,000 a year in revenue that you should be doing if all things being equal. And then you can break it down and say, oh, this is a business that should do roughly $200,000 in EBITDA. And then you can, so all those kind of numbers just make a lot of sense to me as a finance guy.
Yeah.
Because that's what I've been doing for 15 years. So line haul really intrigued me. I found it was kind of hard actually finding runs initially. I got onto a website. I think it's still around, bizbuysell.com. Initially found 4 runs in Chicago. Tried to buy 4 runs in Chicago. It was actually 4 team runs, of which 2 were unassigned. And I'm really glad that I failed miserably because I probably would have failed exponentially fast if I'd done that.
Yeah.
Didn't come with a manager. The seller was kind of remote. He lived in Cincinnati, and he ran like 4 teams in Chicago, ran 4 teams in Nashville, ran 4 teams in Dallas, and he was kind of all over. He was just selling the 4 teams in Chicago.
Yeah.
So even though I was living in Chicago, I failed miserably on buying those 4. I couldn't, the price that he wanted to sell them and versus me wanting to buy them, there was too big of a delta. And so I ended up buying 4 runs in Memphis, Tennessee from a really nice gentleman who agreed to stay on as my manager for 9 months.
Yeah.
Which was great because he taught me a tremendous amount of the business. I think what I learned from him is that FedEx used to do a lot of things outside the contract, and now they do everything inside the contract. And or at least it taught me what is in the contract versus what is like, what the people who don't know how to use a computer very effectively do.
Yeah.
And understand, like, over the last 30 years, I want to say when FedEx bought, actually, I think next year is a 30-year anniversary of FedEx buying Route Package System, which
RPS.
is RPS, which is the framework of FedEx Ground, which is now becoming Federal Express Corporation. But it started off with a guy and a truck, an owner-operator, and maybe he would start with 2 trucks and then get, there's plenty of guys, Steve Crawford, Mike Schuyler, who started off with just 1 truck and now have a 30 or 50 truck fleet, and they've done extremely well. But anyways, as FedEx moved away from, gentlemen who did everything by paper and moved to a format where they wanted to have a much more professional ownership group, they started moving to doing everything really by the book in the contract.
Yeah.
Especially as their business got more complex.
Yep. I think it was a necessary change that kind of had to be made as FedEx evolved. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you go from delivering 1 million packages a year to 1 million packages a month to 1 million packages a week, and then now I think they're averaging on a good day probably 18 million packages a day. During peak, I think it goes up to 26 million packages a day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's astronomical how many packages
are going through this network, right?
So
you did have a manager that first 9 months who was teaching you a lot, because normally, what would you say were the hardest lessons learned in the first 60 days even?
I mean, the hardest, obviously is how important safety is and how focused it is. And back then, it wasn't as big as important, I would say, because they didn't have all the metrics and all the guidance. And I don't think FedEx had realized how having a safer fleet can have such a dramatic impact on their bottom line. So one thing a lot of people don't realize is that FedEx is self-insured.
Yep.
So they don't go out and go to Travelers or Geico and say, hey, I need you to provide insurance for $17,000.
Yeah.
No, they self-insure themselves. And so, having a rear end collision that, does a tremendous amount of damage to a lot of different vehicles on the highway is a astronomical insurance claim against FedEx, which is, self-insured. So having safer vehicles and incorporating a lot more safety technology. And so I came in, I think after my first year in, we started having to adapt to forward collision avoidance mitigation systems. We had to put cameras in their trucks. So I was here for, one of the reasons why I was able to buy the routes I did was because I was buying from people who did not want to make those transitions.
Yeah.
They didn't want to do forward collision avoidance mitigation. They didn't want to put cameras into their, they didn't want to take on deaf engines.
Yeah.
So all those kind of things allowed me to buy the routes I did. Or, for people who don't master safety, that's an opportunity to buy routes that are
Struggling.
Yeah.
But
anyway, so I bought 4 routes from this really nice gentleman who taught me a lot about the business, and he's still in it, or I think it's actually his son is still in the business. I think he's given away his runs to his son. But from there, it was kind of like, hey, FedEx is growing. Do you want any more runs? I'm like, it actually wasn't even that way. It was, hey, do you want to put more trucks on? If you put more trucks on, I can give you more business. It wasn't even, it was just, I can buy some more trucks.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
I have excess cash, and I had planned on, I had put aside a significant amount of money because I figured I was going to have to buy more trucks anyways. Yep. And this is one of the early lessons I made a mistake on. I knew I wanted to replace the trucks because they all had 600 to 800,000 miles, and I was running 2 teams and 2 solo runs.
Oh wow! So teams with that mileage too.
So teams with that mileage on, and so I went out and bought a couple more used trucks. It's like I have 4 runs, 4 trucks. I need some spares. So FedEx then immediately said, "Oh, you have spares. We can give you business. You can find drivers." I'm like, okay, and then I didn't have any spares. Yeah. So I had a truck running up to Woodbridge, so it's about 1,000 miles, a little bit, almost 1,100 miles, from Memphis to Woodbridge. So it's coming back from Woodbridge, New Jersey, down to Memphis, and it blows a cylinder. And that's a catastrophic engine failure.
Yeah.
So that truck is toast. And so the first thing I learned was, don't put trucks with over 600,000 miles on a team run. 1, 2, it's really expensive when you have to dispose of a truck in the middle of nowhere, New Jersey. 3, you have to bring the team back, and then you're losing all this business because you don't have a truck for them to use. So then I had to go out and source a new truck. I had to get, bring the truck on board. So I learned all those kind of things. So the maintenance side, which was one of the areas I was most comfortable with, I learned pretty quickly on you want to have new trucks with warranty when you're running team runs.
Yeah.
You have a truck that goes out of, that blows a tie rod in or blows a head gasket and it's 200 miles away, it's no big deal. You have an engine blow, a head gasket, a head, a cylinder, whatever, and it's 1,000 miles away, it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to what we always talk about, which is one of your principal roles as the owner of the business is contingency planning. Yeah. And sometimes it's a hard lesson learned where you find out how well you contingency planned, and you thought just having a plan B and a plan C was enough, but you might have needed a DEF.
Yeah. I think, one of the things I learned in the Army and then did on Wall Street that works really well in the FedEx space is, always plan for the worst and execute to the best. Plan for the worst case scenario. Plan for your drivers not to show up to work.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? You're always recruiting. Plan for your engines to fail or your trucks to fail or maintenance to go wrong. So always have spare capacity. Don't have too much because that's a drag on your finances, but have spare trucks. You don't want to be 5 runs with 5 trucks. You want to be 5 runs with maybe 2 trucks, extra. So 7 total. Always have contingency plans. Like if your manager's not working out, then start grooming a lead driver. Have plans and thought processes about what you're going to do in each of these different scenarios. So FedEx was, so I actually did really well safety-wise, had no issues for that first year or 18 months. So I was doing really well safety, made a name for myself, got a heads up that there was a contractor in Noki that was looking to sell. I think he might have had some safety issues. Either way, he had a lot of old trucks and didn't want to upgrade to newer trucks.
Yeah.
So I think his fleet, this is 2019, 2020 timeframe, and his fleet was by and large like 2004 to 2007.
Yeah. So nowhere close to being FCAM equipped or retrofittable.
Yeah, so nothing. So I went in and bought. Luckily, we had a 4-year event horizon to equip trucks from, to migrate to FCAM.
Yep.
So I bought I think I ended up buying 12 assigned or 11 assigned runs and 1 unassigned in Noki. And came in with a plan, and FedEx had an incentive to switch over, and it was actually most people don't realize that there was a freight recession going on in 2000 prior to COVID. So used trucks were getting really, really cheap, and then you had this incentive from FedEx, so it wasn't all that bad to upgrade. If
you did it early,
if you bought used trucks, and there was FCAM, it started being introduced, I want to say 2015 or 2016, so you could find used trucks on the market that were FCAM available.
Yep.
So and as I would buy 4 trucks at a clip for $120,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And then FedEx is giving me a $10,000 incentive to buy these. So it was, realistically, cheap. I'm getting trucks for $30,000 a pop, which was really inexpensive at that time. And I bought too many, but it was actually, I got lucky because COVID then happened, and
you needed too many.
I needed too many. Like FedEx, said, how many trucks do you have? And I have 20 trucks. So I bought too many trucks in Noki. I had 12 runs, and they're like, well, we can use all 20. And so they just kept giving me more temp assignments.
Yeah.
And so I used that to just grow in Memphis more, and then in Olive Branch. And so that's how I got to the size I am. Just building up that goodwill, always being the guy to FedEx that said, hey, we need you to do this. Okay, I can do this. I have a truck, I have a driver, I can find you a truck, I can find you a driver. But I had learned pretty early on to get it in writing. It's never like, hey, we'll give you this run. No, you're putting it on, you're giving me a temp assignment. I want it in writing that is a temp assignment.
That's
so that I'm going to run
really
it for
important point. Yeah.
So I'm going to run it for an X amount of time. I don't need it on my A1 or my A2 because that's where temp assignments are supposed to go, but I'm getting it from the planner or getting it from the senior manager. Hey, we're going to have you run this Middleton for 6 months.
Yep.
Or we're going to have you run this Ocala for 9 months. So whatever, but always getting it in writing that they're going to do this. And so that was the big thing.
So you grew by basically saying yes and being ready for every opportunity. Are there times where you said no to some of those opportunities, or maybe you should have said no? Like if somebody's thinking about growing in this space, should they always say yes, or what should they take into account there?
I think so. You have to be careful about how many unassigned runs you take on. So I always took on a lot more dedicated. I never took on too many unassigned. So the most unassigned I've ever had in one location is 3.
Okay.
And that was, at the time in Memphis, I had 1 unassigned team. I had 1 unassigned solo. And then one of my team runs there was something that happened in Salt Lake. And one of my runs went away because of the Salt Lake business. And so that team run, that was a dedicated team run, got converted into an unassigned run. So that was more unassigned than I wanted to in Memphis. But in general, I've always wanted to have at least 1 unassigned in every location I'm in. But I would much rather have much rather have dedicated runs because dedicated runs are consistent cash flows that you can plan out.
Yeah.
And the best way to make money in this business is managing your finances to your pro forma plan.
Yep.
You can't pro forma an unassigned run. You know, one week you might have, I mean, this is a perfect example. My 2 unassigned team runs this week, one did 6,000 miles, the other one did 5,000. Last week, one did 2,200, the other one did 3,700.
Yeah.
So you really can't plan that out. I mean, I estimate that they're going to do about 4,000, 4,200 miles a week, but you're going to have a lot of ebb and flow in
Swings,
that.
right.
And that's hard to plan out. So for me, I try to do dedicated. And where I've seen contractors struggle is where they go into a location and be like, okay, I'm going to take 5 unassigned. Well, that's great when business is booming. It's not really good when business slows down. And so what you saw, a lot of guys during the pandemic took on a lot of unassigned, and then they struggled afterwards when the boom stopped and FedEx is retrenching and consolidating and not hitting those volumes that they were during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. So for me, there were opportunities I had to grow that I didn't take because I wasn't comfortable taking on work where I couldn't predict the cash flows.
That's fair.
Or where I couldn't get enough density to justify myself hiring a manager. Like I didn't want to go into a location where somebody would be like, hey, I'm going to give you 2 runs here, and I promise you I'll get you 2 more. You know, I don't do verbal promises.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to me, you know, FedEx is a business. They're going to do whatever is best for their bottom line. So regardless of what they promise me, if they don't put it in writing, there's no recourse and there's no guarantee that they're going to do this. So for me, if I'm going to go into a location, if I'm going to decide to expand from my 3 locations, which are Memphis, Olive Branch, and Noki, either I'm going to be willing to move into a location that's close. And realistically, Memphis and Olive Branch should be treated as one because they're 19 miles apart. So when I'm looking to expand, I'm looking to either geographically expand into a location near me. So Noki happens to be southern Cincinnati. So like, moving into Louisville would make a lot of sense. Moving into Indianapolis or Columbus, even Toledo or Dayton or Nashville would make a lot of sense because they're close enough that if I don't have a manager initially in those locations, I can support them with a manager either coming from Memphis or from Cincinnati because they're 4 hours apart. You know, so in my mind, I can get one of my managers to drive for 4 hours to once a week to go see a business. I'll pay him to do that until I can get a manager in space there. But to me, I need to have at least a minimum of 3 to 4 runs to justify me expanding this place. I don't want to go into a location. You never go into a location if you're only going to get 1 truck. Yeah. And 2 trucks is really. You really have to know what you're doing to make 2 trucks work. You really want to go in with 3 or 4 because at 3 or 4, you can justify paying a driver manager or a lead driver who takes on a lot of those roles of a manager that you're grooming to become a manager, and then support them with a manager that's going to travel in.
So as you grew, what is kind of the largest size you've gotten up to?
So, I mean, right now I'm at 36 trucks. I'm at 30 dedicated or unassigned runs. My mix is actually, let's see, so 36 trucks. I have 6 teams and 24 solos. Of my teams, I have 4 dedicated teams, 2 unassigned teams, and of my solos, I have 21 dedicated solos and 3 unassigned or wild solos.
And where all are you located?
Located in Noki, which is northern Kentucky, which is just outside of Cincinnati, across the river, Memphis and Olive Branch. And I'm always looking to expand or other locations. To me, I'm not at this point in time with my size, I'm looking for opportunities where I can fix a business that's broken down. So I'm no longer... Like the first business, one piece of advice Spencer gave me, like right as we were signing off, and I think he's always said it at each of his route consultant expos, is buy a good business at a fair price. Don't buy a fair business at a good price because the most important thing you need to learn is when you're getting into this business is that there is no user manual. FedEx does not provide it. They expect you to sink or swim from day one. So find a business that you can buy that is well run, and that has somebody on there that you can ask a lot of questions. Because trust me, there is no one's going to teach you how to do a driver management file.
Yeah.
No one's going to teach you how to onboard a truck. No one's going to teach you how to do an IVMR. No one's going to teach you how to do an MMR. There's all this documentation that you would think would be really easy, and FedEx could give you a frequently asked questions, and you could go to a website and learn how to do it, and it's just not there because of the business model. We are all independent, Linehaul is all transportation service providers, but we're all independent contractors. So we're not franchisees. I'm an independent business owner, and FedEx is not really going to tell me how to run my business. I can decide to run it all on my own.
Yep.
I can have multiple managers. All they care about is that I'm providing them with a truck, with a driver, and that they're getting from point A to point B safely.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good point of, make the first one that you can come in and take over easily and learn. But I do, exactly what you said. It's the same way that we in Spencer grew. Is there's plenty of those, opportunities that are struggling operations you can come in and rebuild, and you can get it at a good price if you know how to do it. And it's just learning how to do it and learning how to run the business first.
And there are so many reasons why sellers need to sell.
Yeah.
And they're not going to sell at top dollar.
Yeah.
You have a gentleman who's decided to take money out of the business for the last couple of years because he's getting close to retirement and he doesn't want to repurchase new trucks. So it's a business that has a lot of old trucks. So maybe he's starting to get hurt on service or getting hurt on availability, or maybe he's getting hurt on safety, and so he needs to sell. But he's already pulled out a lot of the business, a lot of the equity out of that company, and so he's not going to sell it for the top dollar.
Yeah.
So that's an opportunity for you to go in, not have to pay top dollar for a business, and where you're getting something where you're going to go in and replace the trucks or replace the drivers or whatever. Like I bought a business almost a year ago today, where I didn't take any of the trucks. I just bought the routes. The gentleman had, I think the trucks were all from like 2016 or 2014. Like the first year that FCAM was in, they all had over 1 million miles.
Yeah.
He'd already taken all the money out of the business. And literally, I was just buying the routes. I didn't take any of his drivers.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I just said, I can assume this. I can consume it. I can find drivers that are going to drive with my culture. I ended up taking one of his drivers. And then one of his former part-time drivers came to work for me full-time. But I just assumed his business. I fixed it. We ran it more frequently. I went into FedEx, talked about the route construction, and said, hey, I know you have the route running. It was one of the runs was a through run. And I said, hey, it's safer. It's safer. I know it's safer if we do it as a bump instead of a driver, going through and laying 10 and then coming back. And they're like, yeah, we can make that change. And it added some incremental miles to my business. And it was just, we just fixed the business, got it running, and it worked out great.
Yeah. So if as you think back, from the military and driving tanks to Wall Street and bond trading through the financial crisis to where you are today at over 30 runs, what is it that keeps you excited about FedEx and keeps you coming back?
Well, I love growing. I have small targets for myself. I want to get to, right now I'm at 47 employees. I'd like to get over 50. I know that's probably not a positive because
I was like, you just can't wait for all the health insurance you have to pay for.
But I already do.
You do most of that.
I already
right?
do health insurance. Yeah. So I accept running at lower margins than a FedEx Linehaul business can have anywhere between 20 and 30% margins. I accept lower margins because I want to have more managers and I offer really good benefits because I don't like the headache of trying to recruit constantly, or don't want the headache of I don't want to be the guy getting woken up at 2:30 this morning. My manager was the guy getting woken up at 2:30 this morning. So there's small things like that. So I accept lower margins, but I still have goals. Like I want to get to 50 employees, and then I want to get to 10 million in revenue, and then I want to get to 50 trucks, and then then we'll see, And so I'm always looking for those opportunities. Part of it is, you have to decide how much you want to do on your own and then how much you want to do with a partner. Like can I do more on my own? I can probably go a little bit more. I don't know how much more comfortable I am leveraging myself up. Yeah. I'm starting to get to a point now where I probably need a partner, maybe an outside investor to put some more equity in. I bought this last business. It was just 4 runs. I just did it with the company's funds. And so now I'm replenishing and restocking those company funds. Yep. I've actually scheduled it so that I would pay the entire acquisition off in 2 years. And I'm ahead of schedule on that, which is great.
Yeah.
And I keep track of, from a financial metric, I keep track of those kind of things. So, my next goal, so I'm building my kitty, so I can go out and make another acquisition. I think there are growth opportunities with One FedEx, with the merger of Federal Express Corporation and with FedEx Ground, especially on the line haul side. I can't speak to the P&D side, but I see a lot of incremental opportunities from moving freight from the ramps, which is what they call the air terminals, to the ground terminals.
Yeah.
And moving freight that is just going straight to a customer point or going to a location. A lot of people don't understand, like FedEx doesn't fly into every airport in the country. They have specific terminals where they move their air freight into, and then they might move packages from Indianapolis by air to Chicago, but realistically it's a lot cheaper and a lot more efficient if they move it by ground from Indianapolis to Chicago or from Louisville to Dallas. Not Louisville, Memphis to Dallas. The 2 big air hubs or air terminals that they have in the Midwest are Indianapolis and Memphis.
Yeah.
And then there's some on the coast. I think there's, what is there now? Probably 30 big ground hubs and probably 10 to 16 air hubs.
Yeah.
So.
Well, then I'll leave you on this last question.
Yeah.
I always like to ask people, if you could go back, 8 years to when you started, would you do it again?
Oh yeah, 100%. I love what I do.
Yeah.
I think it's part of from this point of where I've, become a line haul contractor, part of what I love about it is I love growing. I love the day-to-day interaction with my drivers, with my managers. I really enjoy working in the FedEx ecosystem. Do you run into knuckleheads? Yes. You run into other contractors that are knuckleheads. You run into drivers that are knuckleheads. But I really enjoy what I do. And I think that's also why I've decided to I started the Line Haul Summit business a couple years ago, and that morphed into something else. And, now I do a lot of work with you guys, and I really enjoy encouraging guys to get into this space. As an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, I think a lot of people are scared of what that first step looks like.
Oh, yeah.
They think it looks like the Grand Canyon, and that you're going to do this all by yourself. But it's not. It's just a small baby step.
It's it's often the hardest step in the whole journey, though, just to get your mindset there.
And FedEx is a great place where you can learn how to be a small business owner, and then you can morph yourself into something else. The number of guys who have started off as FedEx contractors and then decide, you know what, I'm going to go open up this business. I'm going to open up that, because you've learned how to manage your finances, how to identify strong personnel, how to structure your entity, how to delegate. Those are what you need to be able to be a successful small business owner or something else. I think you do a lot of talks with Dave and Amy Byers. I think what's most amazing to me is not how great and successful they've been at P&D and line haul. It's the other businesses that they got into. Their maintenance facility, their pizza business. That's, to me, what is the gold standard about being a line haul contractor, is saying, I'm going to take what I've learned in line haul and do it somewhere else. So Tim Goff starting a software company. So there's that. You have a lot of different people there's guys who've started safety companies. There's guys who started software companies or gone into EMS or gone into waste management or just gone into there's a guy who's done, I think he does Pete's Coffee or Skeeter's Coffee. He got into the coffee chain thing. And so he now owns, not only does he own his line haul business, he owns a chain of coffee. I tell you personally, I I've applied to Dunkin' franchise. I cannot tell you how many times because my wife is addicted to their iced teas. And we live in Denver now, and there's just not a lot of Dunkin' Donuts out there. And so she's like, why don't you become a Dunkin' franchisee now? I'm like, okay, I'll try. I'll try.
Yeah.
And haven't gotten a word yet, but you in a couple of years you might see me as a face with a donut. Hey, time to make the donuts, right?
That's awesome. But yeah, I agree completely that it's not to say this is an easy business, but there are things that we talk about all the time in that you don't have to worry about any accounts receivable. FedEx handles the revenue. This is an operation optimization business. And if you can learn that side of the equation and then go out and build your business where it's like, I've already learned everything else here, but now I can do the revenue, the acquisition, the marketing side. I think it is a really nice incubator for a lot of that.
I mean, it really gets down to there's really, we'll talk about it more at some other time. There's 4 pillars to the business, but at the end of the day, you're not doing logistics. Mm-hmm. You're managing people, you're managing trucks, and you're managing your finances. Yep. So if you can figure out how to do recruiting, if you can figure out how to maintain your trucks, and if you can figure out how to be profitable, then you have a really successful business because you don't need to do all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the one area that a lot of guys get into and they struggle as small business owners is trusting your gut that you can hire good people and you can delegate to them because you really can't grow. Spencer's a perfect example. You can't grow to be as big as the patent group without learning to delegate.
Yeah.
So once you start learning to delegate, that gives you the flexibility to allow your mind to think about, okay, I can make money here. I can make money there.
Yeah. So. Perfect. All right. Well, the last question I'll leave you with, favorite movie, book, or TV show that you're watching right now or reading right now?
So I'm a big Warren Buffett fan. Okay. So
he's looking pretty smart right now.
Yeah, he is. He's looking really, really smart. I've read a lot of books about him. I think what I really appreciate him is that, and everybody can do this from a certain context, is that your job as a small business owner is to be a capital allocator. Mm-hmm. Okay, what I mean is that you're going to consume and you're going to produce a lot of capital in your business. You have a choice of what you do with that capital, that revenue, that money that you're generating. You can reinvest it in your business, you can invest it into another business, or you can take it for yourself. So what has Warren Buffett done over the last 70 years that he's been in business? He's 94 right now. He started at 24. He's done a great job. He hasn't always been the most successful. Everybody likes to claim that he's the most successful stock picker. No, by and large, where he's bought some companies at their lows, but what he's done really well is that when he buys his winners, he stays with them for long periods of time. But what does he do even more than that is he allocates capital really, really effectively. So as a small business owner, our job is to allocate the capital that we accumulate in our business, either reinvest it in your business or reinvest it elsewhere. If you keep taking it for yourself and paying yourself out of dividends, you're never going to grow. You're going to you're going to have a very great life, but you're never going to grow or you're never going to branch out. Mm-hmm. So there's a book, and I don't remember the name of the author, but it's called The Outsiders, and it's not the book with Ralph Macchio and Patrick Swayze and Tom Cruise in the 80s.
The big lead-in to Warren Buffett. Then it's about greasers
book,
in the 60s.
It's about business owners, and it's called The Outsiders, and it looks at 6 or 8 or maybe 10 transformational CEOs and how they grew their companies from a small business in the 50s, 60s, or 70s to a multi-billion-dollar business now. And one of them that really stuck with me when I read the book, and I keep going back to it, and I highly recommend it to everybody, is this guy named Tom Murphy, who started off with ABC Capital Cities way back in the day. He was the guy who merged and created ABC Capital Cities, and then from there, he's the guy who merged it with Walt Disney Companies, and then merged it with ESPN and created this juggernaut of an entertainment company. But his thing was, he ran a very lean operation, He didn't take a whole lot of, he generated a tremendous amount of wealth for himself and everybody that owned stock in his company. But his primary job was he took the capital that was generated by all these broadcasters and news stations and he allocated. He didn't just reinvest it into Buffalo.
Yeah.
He looked at it and said, okay, Buffalo's a stagnant market. I'm going to reinvest it into LA or I'm going to reinvest it into Chicago, which is a growing market. And then from there, he said, okay, well, I don't need to invest it anymore into LA. I'm going to look at something else. So I'm going to buy some newspapers. And remember, this is from the 50s all the way up to now. So he's investing in businesses that were growing. And then when that market, like the return on his capital, return on his investments wasn't great, he looked at other areas. So he got into cable, then he got into sports programming. So he looked for opportunities to reinvest that capital. And so to me, that is a book that I constantly go back to, and I'm constantly reading and saying, okay, how am I reinvesting my capital? So I look for books like that. They're talking about like, how do I make good decisions in my business to reinvest my capital and to make the most of my capital? Because you generate a tremendous amount. You can go out and buy an airplane like somebody does or buy a helicopter, but that's one thing, or you can grow your business and reinvest in it. So that's the books I'm reading. TV shows, not really watching any TV shows right now. I'm working. Actually, I take it back. I'm working my way through the Pacific.
What is that?
It's remember Band of Brothers? So it's a similar kind of concept about the Marines in the Pacific.
Oh, okay.
It's based off of a couple different books, With the Old Breed by Eugene Sledge, and I can't remember the other book by Bob Leckie, but it's just a firsthand personal account of what it was like to be an enlisted soldier in the Marines during the Pacific campaigns.
Okay.
So doing that, I got two kids that play hockey. I got a daughter, like I said, that's about to go off to the Naval Academy. Actually, I don't think we talked about it on the podcast, but I have a daughter that's going off to the Naval Academy. So even though she's going to Navy, which is the arch enemy of West Point and the United States Military Academy, I'm really extraordinarily proud of her. And the fact that she wants to serve her country is amazing to me, and I can't be more proud of her. And then, my youngest is 10, and he's a swimmer, and he's so happy-go-lucky. So I got
Have you convinced him to do water polo yet?
He desperately wants to. He desperately wants to. He needs to become a stronger swimmer. Yeah. And he's a very, very good swimmer. So this fall, he's going to start doing water polo.
Perfect. That's great.
And he's a big kid. He's like 5'4" as a 10-year-old.
As a 10-year-old, yeah.
He's monstrous. So
he's going to grow.
Yes.
Awesome.
So that's why I spend most of my time with shuttling my kids around to their activities, watching a lot of hockey. Actually, my daughter does track. Yeah. So this weekend I'll be seeing her run the 800 and the 400. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, Alex, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for talking through your story and how you grew and what this FedEx space has done for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.